I'm ready to start the to start the webinar when you are.
Great. We can get
I'm
started.
gonna press we can? Okay, I'm gonna press the button and you'll hear her say recording started.
Good evening. My name is Leah Cruzy. I am chair of the DC Public Charter School Board. Thank you for joining us. I would like to welcome my fellow board members and colleagues, including Vice Chair Jim Sandman, Secretary Shakura Adamafanian, Treasurer Chantel Wright, Carissa Stanley Beatty, and Nick Rodriguez. And I'm also excited to welcome Mr. Dwight Davis, who is attending his first meeting as a member of the DC Public Charter School Board. Welcome, Dwight. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dwight Davis. I am a native Washingtonian and proud product of the public school system here in DC. I am also a father of 4 beautiful young men who attended or are attending public and public charter schools. I am a former teacher of 11 years and a school leader of 8 years, and I'm happy to be a part of the board. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dwight, for being part of this together with us. We look forward for you sharing your perspective and expertise in service of the students of the district. Tonight is a special board meeting where we will hear public comment from the community, from Eagle Academy Public Charter School, and from Friendship Public Charter School. Our job, board and staff of the DC Public Charter School Board tonight, is to listen and to ask questions. We will not be holding any votes this evening. This board will then meet again on Monday, August 19th for our regular monthly meeting, at which time there will be votes regarding tonight's matter about Eagle Public Charter School and its future. I will have more comments during the meeting, but for now, I would like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Michelle Walker-Davis.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy, and thank you, board members, including our newest board member, for your service and attention to this important matter tonight. We will be having 2 meetings open to the public within the next week. The first one is tonight, where we will hear from the public, Eagle Public Charter School and Friendship Public Charter School. The second meeting will be this coming Monday, where the board will have the opportunity to decide on the best course of action. Fiscal oversight of public charter schools is an important function of this board. The steps to take are never easy, and often there are competing considerations. But I would encourage all of us here at this meeting and on Monday's meeting to have the students and families of Eagle at the forefront of our minds and the collective responsibility that we have to our charter school students across the district. Last month, due to concerns about Eagle's financial health, DC PCSB staff recommended, and this board approved, placing Eagle Public Charter School under a financial corrective action plan known as FCAP. In response, the Eagle Board entered into discussions with Friendship Public Charter Schools Board about the possibility of Friendship acquiring Eagle's charter. This proposal is what the DCPCSB Board will discuss this evening. Again, we will not have a vote this evening. We will only have a public hearing. Any vote taken by this board will occur on Monday, August 19th, or thereafter as appropriately scheduled. After you hear from the public, you will hear from Melody Sampson, our Chief School Performance Officer, then Eagles Board, followed by Hannah Cousineau, a Senior Manager in the School Performance Department, and Friendship Public Charter School. I will now turn it back to you, Chair Cruzy.
Thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. At the beginning of every board meeting, the DC Public Charter School Board hears public testimony related to items on the agenda and listens to testimony for topics not related to any agenda items. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak, and if you need to make a few additional points, please email your testimony for us to read at public.comment@dcpcsb.org. Public officials who sign up to testify will be allowed to speak up for up to 5 minutes. The hand-raising feature has been disabled. As a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you would like to register to provide live testimony or submit a written comment to the board, you can find all testimony registration and submission information on our website under the Public Comment tab at dcpcsb.org. You can also submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202 328-2660 and select option 2. As we move through each speaker, our Zoom hosts for the evening, Aisha and Courtney, will promote each speaker from the attendee pool and unmute individuals speaking. In a moment, we will hear from the 5 individuals who have signed up to speak this evening. Again, you will each have 2 minutes to speak. To begin, I'll invite us to testify before the board, Ms. Suzanne Wells.
I don't see her in the queue, so I promoted the second speaker.
Okay, welcome. Ms.
I'll keep looking.
I am Valerie Jablo, a DC resident. For years, I and others have fruitlessly documented for DC officials Eagle's numerous fiscal and other violations, such as a CEO paid more than the mayor for a school with less than 500 students, staff members loaning the school money with interest, and less than 2 weeks of cash on hand for 6 of the last 8 years, not paying contractors and property taxes, and building without appropriate permits while damaging properties and creating environmental hazards. But Eagle is hardly the only problem. The notice for this hearing was posted less than 2 weeks ago after the boards of Friendship and Eagle discussed Friendship's takeover of Eagle in closed meetings. 2 days ago, you held a closed meeting about it. Now we have just an hour and a half of public discussion and 5 days before your vote. This quick excluding of the public comes after the only public alarm around Eagle by the Charter Board was raised last month on July 10th. Eagle families were told nothing until early June. Yet in January 2023, you approved Eagle's renewed contract after its 20-year review and cited no mismanagement. The idea that only Friendship can help now is incredible. What kind of inquiry was made and by whom to determine that Friendship is the best option to help families at Eagle? Is Friendship the choice of Eagle after it literally betrayed the public trust? This rush cannot be about Eagle families who have been repeatedly left behind. As it is, Eagle families have an option for school, DCPS. So it seems the rush now is about withholding public scrutiny and keeping the city-owned school building that Eagle leased, Magogny. But DCPS has a right to that building per the lease, and DGS has to sign off on Friendship's plan. So, has DGS signed off? As my written testimony outlines, these are but a few of the many unanswered questions around Eagle and this plan. By contrast, Nevada's Charter Authority investigated Eagle's 1-year-old school there for months for similar fiscal issues. After dozens of hours of public hearings, Nevada closed that school without aiding the bottom line of another charter LEA. DC taxpayers have the same right to know if there was malfeasance by Eagle and by the Charter Board in its oversight. And this quick and private wrapping up by the Charter Board entirely precludes that. You can do better for DC. The question is whether you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha is the first speaker available.
Yes, I did promote her.
Thank you.
Ms. Wells, are you ready to speak?
Yes. Do you want me to go now, or is Aisha?
You can begin.
Charter schools are public schools, and there should be proper oversight of their operations and open public meetings when important decisions are made. The Friendship application raises serious concerns about how it came to be that Friendship would acquire Eagle Academy. There are 70 LEAs in DC. How was it decided Friendship is the best LEA to acquire Eagle Academy? Furthermore, what public input was there on the decision to allow Eagle Academy to remain open rather than closed after the Public Charter School Board raised concerns about the financial stability of Eagle Academy? 2 meetings where decisions presumably were made, the July 12th Friendship Board of Trustees meeting and the July 18th Eagle Academy Board of Trustees meeting, were both closed sessions and not open to the public. There are also serious financial and other questions about the Eagle Academy facilities. The Congress Heights campus is currently leased to Eagle Academy by the DC Department of General Services. The lease terms say the tenant shall not transfer the lease without the consent of the landlord. Has DGS agreed to this lease transfer? The Congress Heights facility is a former DCPS facility. Was DCPS given the opportunity to determine if it needs this facility? Furthermore, both the Capitol Riverfront and Congress Heights campuses were renovated. What are the outstanding loans for these renovations and the Naylor Road facility Eagle built? At the end of FY21, Eagle owed $22.5 million on DC revenue bonds. Have these bonds been repaid, or will Eagle Academy default on these bonds, or will Friendship assume any remaining debt? The Public Charter School Board has a responsibility to ensure financially responsible operation of public charter schools. While I understand the concern for the continuity of education for the nearly 400 students attending Eagle Academy, financial and other issues impacting the entire city deserve a much more judicious and open decision-making process than appears to be currently in place. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. I'd like to clarify some of the points raised in the testimonies provided thus far. You mentioned your concerns with the expedited timeline of this process. Friendship and Eagle have worked together to create a proposal and move quickly to submit a charter amendment request for our consideration. DCPCSB is responsible for the accelerated timeline in an effort to provide critical clarity and certainty for the school's students, families, and staff prior to the start of the school year on August 26th. I also understand some concerns about how the finances at Eagle Academy have deteriorated over time. The board and staff share these concerns, which is why we recently voted to place that school on a financial corrective action plan and cite it for fiscal mismanagement. Ultimately, tonight, we are evaluating the proposal before us and whether Friendship's request to increase their enrollment ceiling and add campuses aligns with our policies. Tonight's hearing, including your testimony, will inform our vote this coming Monday. We appreciate that you've taken the time to speak tonight and brought questions to us. I'd also like to specifically call attention to one portion of the written testimony provided by Ms. Jablow. In it, it's written that Dr. Walker-Davis said that even if the charter board determines that Eagle has committed a criminal act, the charter board will not report the LEA to the DC Attorney General until after conducting its own investigation. This statement is inaccurate. As Dr. Walker-Davis said last month, if in the course of our routine financial oversight work, we have concerns about criminality or irregularities, we would look into it to understand the problem clearly and turn it over to law enforcement. Aisha, do we have our next speakers?
I do not see Sharn in the queue, and I'm trying to promote Shakira Hemphill. They're not accepting it. And I do not see the final speaker. But I'm going to try. I see two Shakira Hemphill, so maybe the one I've been doing the wrong one. Okay, she's coming on now.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Perfect. So great evening, everyone. My name is Shakira Hemphill. I am a native Washingtonian, a mother of an amazing son that was diagnosed with a disability, but I am also a Ward 8 native as well as an educator. I remember leaving Hart Junior High School and walking to the store after school that was situated exactly across from what is now Eagle Academy Public Charter School. See, I grew up right near Magodny Elementary School. That's the school where my family went to. It's the school where I walked to, and I heard the hearts of many parents who were a part of our beloved Ward 8 once it became Eagle Academy. I'm not new to the work of Friendship, as I was blessed to serve in the vision and mission for over 19 years. So today I come as a believer in the work, as one who has contributed and still does to the work, because mission alignment never says goodbye. As a mother of a 19-year-old son diagnosed with a disability, I know now more than ever, there are some things you cannot take a chance on, and one of them is education. See, I left my ward every single day and traveled miles outside of Ward 8 to go to school in Ward 4 because I could not attend my local schools. I recognize that Friendship Public Charter School has a plan that will keep our scholars in their ward and that will give them what they need. A plan that is centered and drenched in action, collaboration, and execution. A plan that's centered in compassion, care, and clarity. A plan that is centered in integrity, vision, and sustainability. Last Saturday, we came together to honor Mrs. Pinckney. It was a room full of over 65 people who were family, community members, former students, and parents who traveled from as far as Florida to see this happen. In that space, we recognize that this would not be the time for our scholars to feel dismissed, displaced, or disregarded. And oftentimes, our scholars that are east of the river, that is the label that they tap into. That is the label that they are oftentimes given. I am encouraging the DC Public Charter School Board, as we all know, that there is a responsibility and there's a level of accountability that has to happen. As someone who has been in consistent work with Friendship, I know that Friendship is not just coming up with a plan. A goal without a plan is just a wish. And our Ward 8 scholars, they deserve more than a bunch of unfulfilled wishes. They deserve reinvigorated hope, commitment, and vision. And I believe and I know, because I've been a part of the work, that Friendship will continue to lead with the heart and with the commitment that is needed for our scholars in Ward 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hemphill. And Aisha, it sounds like the two other public commenters.
They're not in the queue. Yeah, I don't see them in the queue.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you to our speakers this evening. This concludes the public comment portion of our agenda. There are multiple pieces to the request before us tonight. So to begin, we will be hearing from Eagle Academy Public Charter School regarding its proposed asset acquisition by Friendship Public Charter School. That will require Eagle to relinquish its charter. So for that, I'd like to invite Melody Sampson, Chief School Performance Officer, to introduce this discussion. And I'd also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks. Mr. Aaron Lentner, Board Chair, Aisha Briscoe, Board Vice Chair, Sabrina Ogilvie, Board Member and Interim CEO, Jennifer Leonard, CFO, and Sharn Boone-Riffin, Parent Board Member.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Before you engage the Eagle Public Charter School team, I'd like to summarize the school's proposal. On July 18th, 2024, the Eagle Academy Board voted for the school to be taken over by Friendship Public Charter School through an asset acquisition subject to DC PCSB's approval. If DC PCSB votes to approve the acquisition during next Monday's public meeting, Eagle Academy Public Charter School will relinquish its charter and renounce its right to operate its Capitol Riverfront and Congress Heights campuses. Further, if approved, Friendship Public Charter School will assume responsibility for the campuses in time for school year 24-25. Later tonight, my teammate Hannah Cousineau will summarize charter amendment requests from Friendship Public Charter School to accommodate this acquisition. Now I invite you to begin the conversation with the Eagle Academy team.
Thank you, Melody. Welcome, Ms. Leonard. Do you have a few others joining you here?
I believe Mr. Lentner, our board chair, is going to make some remarks.
Yes, if I can just figure out how to operate my phone. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can, Mr. Lentner. Before you start, is there a reason that you're not on video, you and Ms. Ogilvie?
I can try to, is that better?
Okay. Yes, we can see you. Thank you.
Okay. So I just had some quick public remarks I'd like to make. So PCSB board and staff, thank you for giving Eagle Academy leaders the opportunity to speak with you today on this proposal. I first came into the Eagle Academy community as a parent of two daughters who attended Eagle. I lived in Congress Heights area of Southeast for several years, and my daughters attended Eagle for 8 years and participated in the special education program. While there, I watched them thrive and grow. Eagle's mission of building a strong foundation for all students in a rich, robust learning environment that considers the whole family and community in supporting the growth of Eagle students emotionally, creatively, and academically. This commitment was evident in my children and their classmates. After becoming involved in outreach to prevent the closure of the Capitol Riverfront campus in favor of yet another high-rise building in the Navy Yard area, I joined Eagle Academy's board as the parent member. As a board member, I observed a strong educational program, a dedicated staff, and a warm and nurturing school community. Over my 6 years on the board, both demographics and population trends in the city have undergone significant change. New schools have opened and existing schools have grown. Consequently, like many charters, Eagle's enrollment has declined. Following our return to some sense of normalcy from COVID, our board should have challenged the former CEO and accounting team and should have delivered a greater degree of accountability in their decisions regarding Eagle's budget. While the board performed these responsibilities, the evidence demonstrates that we were not aggressive enough in our oversight. By the spring of 2024, the board became more acutely aware of the financial challenges that existed, and Eagle's board initiated rapid and decisive actions to improve the school's financial positions. These decisive steps included holding the former CEO to greater accountability for both his strategic and tactical financial decision-making, as well as ultimately leading to his resignation. We hired a new CFO, brought on a new accounting firm, secured a leadership coach and training for the interim CEO, conducted a bottom-up complete assessment of all contracts, staffing, and compensation, and overall, we took significant right-sizing actions as appropriate. Additionally, the Eagle board and staff engaged in consistent and frequent communication with PCSB staff. Despite our efforts and despite critical improvements in the budget and establishment of significant internal controls, by early July, Eagle's financial outlook for 2025 remained fragile as a result of our continued enrollment challenges and the residual effects of not making those necessary right-sizing actions commensurate with enrollment trends over the prior years. As I have stated, Eagle kept an open line of communication with PCSB staff, and we remain grateful for their scrutiny and ongoing challenging questions. We openly grappled among our team and with PCSB staff about numerous solutions to our financial difficulties, as well as contingency plans, including the possibility of exploring a merger via an asset acquisition. This idea came up as early as June, and the PCSB staff suggested that we should consider it as an option if our financial outlook remained poor into the summer. At the July 12th public meeting of PCSB, where we discussed Eagle's financial corrective action plan, a PCSB board member encouraged us to take seriously the merger option if it gave us a way that got us to excellence. The following week, another PCSB member connected us via email to a particular LEA that was interested in a merger. While Eagle's intention was always to remain an independent LEA, ultimately our board's responsibility was to secure the best outcome for students, families, staff, and to reduce uncertainty for the community. Thus, we began engaging with schools that we learned were interested in the partnership. And it was worth noting that ever since we first came under increased financial scrutiny in the spring, we have remained open to and attempted to implement all the guidance provided to us by PCSB staff and board members. Ultimately, we have pursued an asset acquisition with Friendship Charter School, an LEA that has demonstrated that it's both financially able to support Eagle's 2 campuses by the start of Eagle's academic year, and it's eager to safeguard Eagle's vision, programming, and legacy. The academic results of Friendship's elementary schools, including those that have been acquired by Friendship, demonstrate their ability to provide our students with an excellent education. Further, some of the key programs that Eagle has offered in the past were unable to offer last year due to our financial challenges, such as the swimming program at our Congress Heights location can be offered once again under under Friendship's operation. Eagle and Friendship leadership teams have provided various opportunities for families and staff to engage and understand what Friendship has to offer the Eagle community, and we are enthusiastic about the future possibilities. I would like to conclude my statements today by reflecting that there are many ways that this feels like a sad day for Eagle. Our founder, Cassandra Pinkney, and our many staff members that have worked for decades to provide a supportive and complete learning environment for our students. Generations of DC scholars have gotten their start at our schools with devotion and care. My team did not want to close that chapter of Eagle's story, but more than that, we did not want our students and our community to lose their neighborhood school or to be forced to scramble following the completion of the lottery to find a new and to them likely unknown school community. I want to fully acknowledge that the Eagle board should have taken earlier action to address the budget issues caused by declining enrollment and the financial decisions of our former CEO. I thank the PCSB and staff for the heightened partnership, financial scrutiny, and problem solving these last several months. And I am grateful for the partnership that Friendship Public Charter School is offering, and I am confident that the academic, operational, and financial health of Eagle is in good hands with Friendship. Eagles Academy's board holds ourselves accountable, and I humbly ask the Public Charter School Board to support this proposed asset acquisition, which we believe is fundamentally in the best interest of the 350 students currently enrolled at Eagle Academy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lendner. I know our board has a number of questions, and we have other members of the Eagle team here. Before we get to questions, are there any other presentations or remarks from members of the Eagle team?
No, thank you, Ms. Cruzy.
Okay. I'm going to open up to the board to get us started.
Good evening. I do want to just start by clarifying for the record. I think we use a lot of terms a lot of time that the public may not be aware of. So I just want to make sure we are all clear. We're here as of today because you, Eagle Academy, your board, you voted unanimously on July 18, 2024 to relinquish or give up your charter to the Public Charter School Board and pursue a merger with Friendship Public Charter School, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And to be clear for all, to relinquish your charter means that you, Eagle, want to give up the charter agreement that establishes the independent school of Eagle Academy as it stands today, that those same parents that you spoke of signed up to attend, and turn those assets of Eagle Academy, namely the buildings, the property and belongings inside, and in essence, the students and the revenue that follows them over to another LEA, in this case, Friendship. Because you as a board have decided that because of the financial money issues you've had to date, you can no longer operate Eagle Academy as an independent or single site public charter school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I think my first question, and I want to make sure, because at this point, the charter board has not closed Eagle. We have placed you on a financial corrective action plan, which we deem a FCAP. But I just want to make sure we have not closed Eagle, told you that you have to close. We have created some very clear financial benchmarks, but you and your board on July 18th came to the conclusion to relinquish pending a charter. Pending a merger, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I think I want to just hear staff, when did we receive Eagle Academy's notice of its intent to relinquish or give up its charter?
I believe that was a day after or the evening of the school's board's vote.
Okay. So Eagle, my question, if you voted to relinquish your charter on July 18th, why did you just officially notify the charter board on, what are you saying, Melody? You're saying Monday evening? We got it Monday? Or yesterday?
The notice, the written memo we received on Monday, but the school sent a communication after its board meeting on the 18th.
Can you say the date of the notice, Melody, for the record?
So the official notice, the one that is attached to tonight's board meeting materials, we received on Monday, August 12th.
Okay. So I think
we communicated the evening that we decided to vote with PCSB staff our intention to submit the official paperwork.
Okay, but you officially submitted it. You voted July 18th, notified us verbally, but you gave official written notice on the 12th.
They submitted a written notice on the 18th via email. It just wasn't a standalone memo.
Okay, okay.
We use the intervening time to put together a package to support your ability to make this challenging decision in an informed manner.
Okay, okay. So I just want to confirm kind of where Eagle is as of today and get a better understanding of your staffing. Thank you for, I know we requested some information about the two campuses. So I just want to verify with you all. You have a total of 353 students enrolled, 230 at the Congress Heights campus and 123 at Riverfront. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, Ms. Ogilvy, are they all fully enrolled, meaning with all residency and enrollment documents collected? You're on mute. You're on mute. You went back to mute.
Sorry, I keep touching. I'm sorry. I can say yes for Capital Riverfront. Please excuse me for not having the specific number, but we do have a few students at Congress Heights who are returning students who have not yet provided us with their updated information.
Okay.
We're expecting to clean up by Friday of this week. We have an enrollment activity happening, and staff will be on site to work with these families.
Okay. Because we're talking about children who need to have a space. If you can make sure that the board gets an updated list of fully enrolled, so we know what number we're dealing with overall. I also want to understand your current staffing, because it's my understanding, and thank you for sharing, you have 88 staff members for those 353 students. That seems like a lot. So, and the reason I'm pushing is because, right, part of the FCAP and the pressure, the expectation was that there would be some elimination of cost to have a corresponding budget, a budget that corresponds with your actual financials. So it's what's my understanding of that 88 staff, 30 of them are classroom teachers, 10 are administrators, 36 are support staff, which includes your instructional aides, dedicated aides, behavior support, and service providers. 12 are food and nutrition staff. And you have of that, 6 of that staff work at a central office location. And one is a consultant, Jennifer Leonard. So I have a few questions. First, Jennifer, I thought you were actually on staff as the Chief Financial Officer.
I am the Chief Financial Officer. I just have a contract instead of being on the payroll.
Okay, okay. And is your contract, is it for this fiscal year as well, this school year as well?
It's for this fiscal year, so it is through June 30th, 2025.
2025, okay. Mr. Ogilvy, can you tell, what are the 6 administrative staff that's working at the central office? What are they doing? I'm trying to understand how that works with the number of children you have. What are those 6 administrators doing at the central office?
Okay, the 6 administrators include our data manager, our special education director, our chief administrative officer who oversees enrollment, myself, our HR manager. Who am I missing? And I am missing the executive assistant.
Okay. Have you all thought about cutting? When we think about trying to be fiscally managed, have you thought about cutting that central office and you are working at and from one of the 2 school buildings you have?
Yes, we have. Jennifer and I have been in conversation, and she's actively working on whether it be relinquishing our lease. I'm not quite sure what exactly will happen with that. And the central office staff would relocate to the Congress Heights campus where there is adequate space for us to operate.
I'd like to comment on that real quick.
Please.
That was is a great question, and one of the first that the board asked this spring relative to right sizing. The challenge with sorry, I don't have my video on. My Wi-Fi is not strong enough, and I'm cutting in and out on my end. I
Okay, well,
apologize.
I appreciate you sharing that because I'd much rather be talking directly to
Oh,
you. I
I
appreciate you
would.
sharing that. I got you. Go ahead.
Um, we entered into the most recent lease on the central office before COVID, and we locked into a long-term lease, which at the time we thought locking in that rate was a smart financial decision at a lower rate over a many-year lease. At this point, due to the low occupancy of that location with work from home, not our office building, but the remaining of the offices in that building, we are having challenges getting out of the lease in a way that does not ultimately cost us just as much or more as occupying that location. If we could walk out of there tomorrow in a financially smart way, you would not have to ask that question. We would be doing it.
Okay. And then I just have one more, then I'm probably gonna, I know I'm gonna come back to you, but I'm gonna ask one more question. I don't know if it's Jennifer is better, Aaron, whoever, but tell us where you are right now as a school. So describe to us your progress meeting the terms of the, we say FCAP, but that's the Financial Corrective Action Plan that this board issued on July 10th, 2024.
I can summarize that, and then for any follow-up questions, I would definitely turn that over to Ms. I think I moved to a different location. I might be able to get my Wi-Fi on a little better there.
Thank you.
We have made significant progress, have taken actions to reduce staff. As I said in my prepared notes, we have, and I have personally been involved with taking actions to do a bottom-up assessment of all staff, focus mostly on staff, not teachers, because we did not want to cut. We wanted to keep the direct engagement with the student personnel largely unaffected to deliver a positive educational experience. But we took a bottom-up look at staff and compensation, as well as contracts and other areas where it was made sense to take actions that frankly should have been done several years earlier, as our enrollment dropped after COVID. We've taken those actions. Those actions have been implemented, and we have a significantly improved day-to-day cash flow, as well as a significantly improved fiscal year 25 budget. We currently see strong challenges in meeting the FCAP targets that Eagle agreed to, which is why the board voted to pursue this asset acquisition. That principally is a result of enrollment not being where we would like it to be, and by the order of 10 to 20 families, and the result of the debt we carry from this last year and a half while not taking the actions we should have taken in the past. So if either of those two challenges were less, I see us being absolutely able to meet the FCAP targets. It's the enrollment, as well as the current challenges that we have financially. We see significant challenge in meeting the FCAP targets. That's where I see us. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Jennifer.
No, not specifically to the FCAP targets. While we were I'll just elaborate a little bit and say, while we were extremely hopeful, optimistic, and worked very hard to understand what the financial picture was in real reality over the months of June and July, and wanted to be able to meet all the FCAP targets, it became pretty clear to the board and to myself and to our accounting team, our new accounting team, that we were not able to meet the FCAP targets even if we were to make enrollment. And honestly, I thought that in June and early July, there was a chance. And as additional, I would call, remnants of previous decisions and previous expenditures keep coming to light, it's not doable. It's not doable in a way that will meet the current FCAP targets. We did, as a staff and a board, submit propose revised FCAP targets, understanding that those may be a little bit more realistic, but we also understood that they were not palatable for the PCSB, and we were informed that those would not be able to be approved.
So just to clarify,
Yeah.
you submitted revised, you're talking about during the negotiation phase.
Yes.
You gave a
Yes.
different, okay. And what I hear you say is that, well, let me let me summarize what I'm hearing and tell me if I'm correct. So you're saying that because of the current enrollment, because of the restrictions of the FCAP, you don't think you would meet it, but do you think you could meet it with the 350 you have?
No. So we couldn't even make it with the revised enrollment of 375. We initially started at 381. We revised it downwards to 375, and we wouldn't make FCAP targets with 375.
Okay, I should have rephrased. Do you think you could be financially stable, just FCAP agnostic for a minute, with 350 children? That I meant to ask that instead.
Yeah. No, we have strict
Why?
staffing. Oh,
Because what? Say it again. I was saying why, but you started answering.
When I say we, leadership and in partnership with several board members have reviewed our staffing model and all of our significant expenses over and over and over again. And there is nothing left to be stripped from the budget. We have a minimal staffing pattern that we believe can serve students, but it's not ideal. And unless we removed entire grades, we can't reduce any more of our teaching staff. Ms. Wright, you asked earlier about, have we reduced our office staff, our central office staff? And we have. We made some cuts between fiscal year 24 and 25 to the central office staff. And Sabrina and I went through every single member that's currently there and determined that each one of them is serving a critical need to meet both student needs and compliance needs. There's no one left across the board to reduce or to cut from the staffing budget, which is, as you all know, about 70% of most budgets. We have pretty significant lease and loan liabilities right now, which in the moment we don't see changing or negotiable.
Thank you.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Thank you, Ms. Leonard. I actually have a couple questions for you. So I just want to be clear, based on what I heard you just say, I want to restate it. What you are saying to us is that Friendship is no longer economically viable. As you sit here today, that's what you're saying?
Eagle is...
Eagle, you said Friendship, Carissa.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
I
Eagle could, with the way we have projected our cash flows right now, and we've worked really hard to do it in a most reasonable, practical, and realistic way. Eagle could stay open, potentially, but would come very close on some weeks to not meeting payroll. And if we have any hiccups or any unforeseen activities, which do happen in the course of almost any organization's life, we likely wouldn't make payroll. I'm putting aside, when I say that, the FCAP targets. So the FCAP targets, unless, and I don't mean to be glib, but if less money comes out of nowhere or starts falling from the sky, there is no way to make the FCAP targets. With 375 students, which is what we've currently budgeted for, we will make it, again, if there are no unforeseens. If we do not meet 375 students, we are not economically viable.
Thank you. And I will now read from my notes so that I will not misspeak. So my next question for you is, there in your official notice to the board, and I'll pull your exact language, where you talked about relinquishing your charter, you said, and I quote, due to a series of financial missteps, largely caused by declining enrollment in a budget that has not been accordingly adjusted. The LEA's financial standing suffered, jeopardizing our ability to fulfill the mission. What were those financial missteps?
So I'll start that one. Let's see if I can get my screen on again. So I'd like to make one clarification and then answer your very good question. When we talk about financial viability, part of financial viability, which is to me and the Eagles board and staff, isn't just do the numbers on the sheet of paper make sense? It's do you have sufficient margin to deal with reality? An example that comes to mind is just 2 years ago, we had to make significant improvements and fixes to the Congress Heights location's HVAC. Years before that, there was issues with plumbing. So things occur, and principally that's why the FCAP exists and the requirements associated with days on hand exist, is so that you can come through those types of things. Given where we currently stand, we could make it at 375. We could make it with slightly less in future years once we deal with some of the lease and financial liabilities that we have, which we are working on, but don't change overnight. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. Now to get to your question on, but we would not make the FCAP targets. So to your question of financial actions that I was referring to, after COVID, enrollment started to decline. Enrollment had been declining for several years, and that's not unique to Eagle. During COVID and also before COVID, Eagle invested significantly in services for our students and the community, as well as staffing. As our enrollment declined, we did not take away some of those things that we added during COVID as supports, as well as some of the things we were able to provide when we were more had a better, higher enrollment and more financial ability. So we did not take those right-sizing actions over several years and instead took less significant actions, and we basically found ourselves on our back feet. And we should have taken action sooner, but that's what I'm speaking of, when we just principally didn't follow the enrollment trends over several years and built basically a backlog we have to dig through.
Okay. Talk to me about the oversight of your board during that time period.
So I believe I spoke to this at the last meeting, and so I'll be a little briefer here, and I can go into details if as you see necessary. We have routine meetings of Eagle Academy's board, and we review both the budget and quarterly financials relative to liabilities, assets, income, student enrollment, grants, and cash flow. And where Eagles board could, so that's what we're required to do, and Eagles board did do that. And we showed, we were presented information that was in the green, as it were. We did not ask sufficiently challenging questions.
What does that mean?
Presentations.
What does that mean in the green? I'm sorry. It's probably a term I just don't know. What does
just the cash flow was positive.
Fine. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
there was an issue at one point where the accounting team used the incorrect enrollment numbers, and that delay, so that clearly changes what the cash flow options are. And when that was discovered partway through the year, the financial outlook, well, it had not been where we wanted it to be, and we're taking actions to improve it and challenging the financial team. The board was. It significantly and overnight changed the from being in the green or cash flow positive to cash flow negative. And so that's what I mean by saying that Eagles board did not ask sufficiently. I mean, hindsight is 2020, but we could have asked more challenging questions. And ultimately, this comes down to financial controls internal to Eagle and what not sufficient, what who was looking close enough that wasn't independent of the team putting together the budget that would have been able to identify such things versus at a summary presentation to the board.
And thank you for that. And when you say that they used incorrect enrollment levels, I think that's what you said. When you say they used them, you mean they put them into financial statements. They put inaccurate data into financial statements. Is that what I'm just trying
That
to.
is not,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
When developing the budget, they had not accounted for, they'd used outdated enrollment numbers between years to put into the budget projections relative to where we set staffing, contracts, and other financial decisions, not that we submitted incorrect enrollment numbers to PCSB or other compliance documents, but the internal documents we were using to make financial right-sizing decisions were not what they should have been.
Okay. Okay. In your letter, thank you for that. In your letter, you also go on to say that in the spring, your board initiated rapid and decisive action to improve your financial position. Talk to us about if and when you communicated with families, given what was clear to you and staff in terms of Eagle's financial condition?
So that's a very good question. I will turn it over after I answer from my perspective. I will turn it over to Sabrina for some more details relative to the what was said when to Eagle families. What was challenging from the board's perspective was we got in early spring some of, largely due to PCSB's engagement, Eagles board became more engaged. And at some of the numbers no longer made sense at the high level. And so we started taking decisive action relative to staffing, as well as getting new leadership and bringing on Jennifer as independent and new financial assessment. It was several months given that we took a complete bottom-up new look at everything, staffing, contracts, and our entire financial position. So it was a very dynamic environment relative to where we were actually going to end up relative to cash flow. And that's ultimately what this challenge is a cash flow issue, not one of can Eagle operate with the students we have? It's the budget. So we didn't know till quite late.
Enrollment, though, right? Your budget is okay.
But also the budgetary decisions over the last several years. So it's really a two-factor kind of issue. And I'm not making an excuse, so please don't take it this way. I hold Eagles board and myself responsible. Had we made different financial decisions over the last 2 years, we would have a different cash flow than we have today.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, Aaron. And if you don't mind, can I elaborate on
Please
that,
do.
please?
Yes, please do.
So I'm going to go back to your good question, Ms. Beatty, asking about, if we were at 350 enrollment, could we make it this year? If we were to start over as a new organization, I think it's totally doable. However, we would need a lot more runway to reduce liabilities. That takes some time in order to be able to do that successfully in any given year. We have, I think, about $1.5 million of liabilities that we have to use with our FY25 dollars to pay for liabilities from prior years. So we're starting this year, to be honest, with a deficit. So if we could start with the fresh start, the fresh budget that didn't presume or have to assume liabilities from prior years, then I think there's a world in which we could do it, especially if we continue to push enrollment. We have climbed since last week, and we continue to aggressively try to attract students. What I think is paramount in all this is that we don't want to get into the school year and then find out we actually can't make the changes that we'd hoped to make on leases, or we didn't get quite enough students to really make the budget that we would need to get through this school year. And so our decision making in the moment is, where are we in the school year for this school year? Excuse me, where are we with the budget for this school year? I think we'd be having a different conversation if we didn't have residuals from the prior years coming into this school year.
Okay. I thank you. I understand that. And your statement about starting clean and it being obviously a better situation if you weren't, and excuse me, I'm using liberties here, if you weren't saddled with debt, it would be a different situation. I understand that and I appreciate that. Can I just make sure that I heard what communication has been given to families? Did I miss it? I probably missed it.
We did not actually answer your question. So we were giving the,
I'm making sure I didn't miss it.
You did not miss it.
Okay.
The background I was hoping to give you there is, we didn't fully understand our own financial position with confidence until later in the summer. And so now Sabrina can give you the when we said what, when, but it's going to seem later than it should sitting here with the perspective we have today.
Well, I appreciate that. And before Sabrina speaks, I just want to say, for the record, I remember during our conversation about the FCAP, Board Member Wright was very expressive in speaking with you all about making sure families were notified, at least at that time. And that was a conversation that I was a part of. So I want to be clear with that before you answer the question.
Correct. Agree.
Yes, good evening. In response to your question, we have since that meeting, we have met with families via Zoom, in person at each campus, and we've continued written communication to families, detailing as much as I could without providing exact figures, since that is still something being investigated, probed. We're still doing our fact finding from our finance department, but I did share with all families in each of those meetings that our finances were not at the level to sustain Eagle with all its programs, so the students are not being shortchanged on quality education. I have also shared with families steps that we've taken to improve the financial status at the time. And since then, we have also shared with families the proposal for a merger with a school that would partner with Eagle to enable Eagle students not to be displaced, to provide them with their same familiar, warm learning environment, while at the same time being able to offer Eagle the support to be financially stable and be able to offer all the programs that Eagle has committed and through the years have been offering, in addition to ones which we offered in the past, and for financial reasons, we were not able to continue. We are hoping to bring those back this school year, should we be allowed to move forward with the merger or the asset acquisition. My apology.
And that's okay. And when did that communication start? Do you know offhand when your first communication with parents and families occurred?
So prior to our board meeting or meeting here with the charter board, we did do a number of communication written. Immediately after the board meeting, I think my first meeting was the 15th with families, but I can go back and check all my dates and provide those. So I had Zoom, I had in person, and I continued to send written notification. So we had 2 Zoom sessions, we had 2 in-person meetings, and we have sent written notification. And that's prior to the additional Zoom meetings and in-person meetings we've held regarding the expiration of the asset acquisition.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one more question for now. Mr. Lintner, could you confirm for me? I thought I heard you say that the Public Charter School Board encouraged the asset acquisition. Did you say that?
I don't believe I used that word. The way I would like to say it is, and it's different depending on PCSB members or staff. The one PCSB member during our FCAP mission meeting, now I had already said that that was one of the alternatives we were considering, did bring up that we should explore it as a suggestion. Given that I had already said we were looking at it as an option, I view that as not encouragement, but making sure that we explore all avenues to ensure we are able to reduce uncertainty and deliver responsibly for the communities that we serve, is how I would say that. With respect to the board staff, significantly before the FCAP meeting, when we were engaging with the additional financial scrutiny and whether related to payroll during the summer, it was a subject of discussion between PCSB staff and ourselves of, even though PCSB staff did not take action to revoke Eagle's charter due to not having sufficient cash flow, it was brought up, and I agreed with one of the possible options we could pursue would be seeking an asset acquisition. Even what I'll say it as we shouldn't be risking without confidence closing mid-school year, is how I would view that as a contingency Eagle should explore, was suggested by PCSB staff.
Thank you.
And I think to clarify even further, I think we've all had very transparent and open and honest conversations among staff and board members. And when we discussed at the FCAP hearing the possibility of seeking partners, I think there was outreach afterwards by a board member or maybe several board members connecting us to possible opportunities to help us pursue merger and or acquisition paths.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. I'm okay for now.
Thank you. Vice Chair Sandman.
Mr. Lintner and Ms. Leonard, I appreciate your candor in assessing the current financial status of Eagle. I just want to be sure I understand what you're saying. Is it correct that your best current prediction is that you will not be able to meet the terms of the financial corrective action plan?
Without additional enrollment, which is not guaranteed between now and October, yes, we do not project what we meet the FCAP. Historically, Eagle has gotten additional students after the school year starts. So it is possible that enrollment, and Jennifer, you can help me, I think enrollment around 390 would be sufficient to meet the FCAP targets, but there is no guarantee we will make that enrollment. And at our current enrollment that we can count on, we will not meet the FCAP targets based on our projections.
We will not meet FCAP targets with current enrollment projections, which are currently 375. We could stay open, barely, as long as we didn't have any unforeseen circumstances. We would be short about $1.6 million if we met the enrollment target of 375. So in other words, we would need an additional about $1.6 million if we met 375 students in order to meet FCAP targets. Our average per pupil enrollment, if you consider SPED, at risk, pre-K, things that provide additional funding, is about $32,000 a student. So I am not able to do very quick math and say 1.6 million divided by 32,000, but I certainly can do that in a moment. But that's, if you did that math, that's how many students we would need over 375 in order to meet FCAP targets.
And separate and apart from the FCAP requirements, your assessment is that you might be able to meet your cash flow requirements to get through the next academic year if you can meet your enrollment targets? And if nothing else unforeseen happens.
That's
correct.
Well, I think you mentioned unanticipated HVAC expenses, for example, just things come up. There's something else that's come up, and it's the precariousness of your financial situation. I don't think the precariousness of your financial situation and the public airing of it, which is necessary, is helpful to your enrollment projections.
It is not.
So if the asset acquisition agreement is not approved and you have to try to go ahead on your own, I think the chances of meeting your enrollment targets are significantly diminished by the process that we're going through here. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Not to say that this process is not required or even punitive. It is open and required and needed.
Thank you. Have you considered or talked to any other LEAs about an asset acquisition?
We have. I spoke with myself, met with two other LEAs. What presents a challenge here is the timeline to accomplish an acquisition. You know, if we had a year of runway, or we're in a different place, I think that we would have more opportunity to find and encourage a wider range of LEAs to partner with. It pretty quickly became apparent that Friendship had both the financial capability as well as the aligned mission with Eagle to get this done on the timetable required to not threaten our community with uncertainty.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Thank you, Jim. Nick?
Great, thanks very much. And thank you all for being here. I know this is a difficult time and a difficult set of circumstances. So one thing that I'm just wondering generally is, Sabrina, you referred to it earlier a little bit. We've heard a lot of input from a lot of different people about this. and different opinions about whether the asset acquisition is a good idea. One thing that's always hard to discern is really what do families think of it. So I've heard you say that they have a sense of what's happening, that they have a sense that this merger is possible, and I suppose potentially a sense that it might not happen and that would be difficult. Do you have a sense of, or is there any evidence you can point to about what sentiment is across students and families who are currently at Eagle? And I'll take what I can get, but obviously actual hard evidence would be incredible if that's available at all.
Okay, so yes, families are aware of the possibility. We have hosted meetings, joint sessions between the Friendship Instructional Leadership Team and the Eagle team with our families. We have provided them opportunities for questions and answers. We are currently actually engaging with families for them to provide their feedback. From those whom we have met and spoken with, I have only actually had 2 families who have said openly that, this is not their first choice and would wish for Eagle to remain open. Others have shared their support, and we have provided them opportunity. They can send their feedback in writing, ask questions in writing. And so far, like I said, there have only been 2 families who have questioned and have shared that they're still undecided. We had 2 families who needed more information, who were undecided. They have a number of kids. And once we were able to reach out to those families and respond to all the queries and the fears and concerns they had, both of those families went ahead and completed their re-enrollment. So we are providing them the opportunity to reach out to us. Friendship is also available for questions and concerns from families, so that it's not that Eagle is pushing you to respond, or we're giving you one side of the conversation. We're making it open so that any questions you have, you are free to ask. We have encouraged our families. We continue to send information out to our families to say, please reach out with all your questions and concerns. There's a dedicated email address for questions and concerns, and we get back to you in 24 hours. So we have been successfully responding to the questions and concerns. I've not yet had a challenge which we were not able to respond to.
So the way this is being framed to families right now, though, is that it's a possible thing, and the alternative to that possibility is that Eagle continues as it is.
Yes,
is that right?
That has been my message to families. Tonight, we may ask some other questions, some more difficult.
Understood. Yes. Understood. Yeah. I understood. Understand the challenge of that, and the third option there of kind of families needing to find somewhere to go pretty quickly, right? If things were to change rapidly here. The other thing I'm wondering about is, per what my colleague, board member Sandman said, suppose this asset acquisition isn't approved, what do you all plan to do?
I will take that question. Eagles board will have to make some hard decisions and ultimately decide based on what information is before us with respect to where enrollment actually stands, and that gets to partial enrollments that have not completed registration and other things, as well as where we are relative to available steps to take relative to cash flow, and ultimately have to decide how we think we will, what the runway is and what challenge that would present to students and families. What I don't want to have happen is for Eagle to open, me as personally as I joined the board as a parent member. I'm the current chairperson, but as a parent of elementary school children, I would not want to be placed in the position of needing to find a new school around the holidays. That does not seem to me to be an acceptable outcome. Regardless of what other possible outcomes there are, that doesn't seem acceptable to me.
Sure. Yeah. And just so we're clear, the relinquishment of your charter is at this point conditional upon this board approving the asset acquisition. Is that right?
Correct. That is what Eagle's board has voted on.
Okay, fine. Last just note for staff and for Ms. Ogilvy, like if there is any kind of evidence in terms of sort of parent and family sentiment on this, I think I'd be interested to see it before Monday. I mean, I know it's not all the record, but it's additional information for the record, if you would be able to do that.
I will.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Treasurer Wright has some additional questions. Thank you, Nick.
So first, I want to appreciate what Board Member Salmon has shared about the impact of airing the situation. And I want to go on record that my questions are intentional to share exactly what has happened at Eagle because families deserve it, especially families east of the river, to know what is happening in their school and what has happened. The public deserves to know what has happened and what has happened with public funds. And Eagle, you have to be accountable for it. You received autonomy. You received public funds in exchange for that accountability. And the charter, I'm speaking directly to the board, the charter is between this board and you all. And when we have issues of fiscal questioning, patterns of behavior that show that there isn't a safeguarding of public funds, we're going to talk about it, not just with Eagle, but with everyone. We have 3 obligations as an authorizer: to open, close, and evaluate schools. And the one, while I understand at the end of the day, we are here for academics, I'm never going to deprioritize that, but the one that you will always hear, not just Eagle, we've had issues before since I've at least been on this board where there has to be a public reckoning and accountability for what you do with public funds. And the impact of that is for you to address and for you to own, and not for us as the authorizer who are simply doing what our job requires. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate that there's impact. I also want to acknowledge and appreciate that you knew there was impact much, you knew a long time ago. The depth of it may not have been known until the spring, but you knew. And the fact that you didn't, if you didn't know, that is your obligation. And I'm not just speaking to you, I'm actually speaking to every LEA that watches this. Boards, staff have an ultimate responsibility for what has happened with public funds and what happens. And when you don't, you have to be accountable for that behavior. And the impact of that is as a result of your behaviors. So I just want to acknowledge that, of course, it's not easy, but our job is not here right now to make that part easy on you. It is to hold you accountable for what has happened with public money. So my first question is, I think, Board Member Rodriguez answered it, because you did submit a relinquishment, but it is conditional. So I'm actually, let me ask a different question. You shared that right now there is not a world where Eagle could maintain fiscal viability with 350 students enrolled, correct? I just want to make sure we're hearing that.
With 350 students, we are not cash flow positive every day. There are days we are not cash flow positive in fiscal school year 25 at 350 students.
And I want to make clear that you've said because of the amount of debt and things you have, and you title them in your own letter missteps. There are no additional moves that you can make, inclusive of this central office building, lease, et cetera, that you think you can make to create a more viable school with 350 students and 80-something staff members.
And to be clear, Chantel, I think they said 375 students. So even with 375, they wouldn't be viable.
At 375, we will not meet the FCAP targets.
Got it.
We will likely be able to, it gets to how the year actually progresses, whether we would make it at 375. That said, Eagle supports the FCAP that this board voted for, because it's not just can you make it through with the skin of your teeth, it's you need to be financially healthy, and we support the FCAP targets. To the question of, sorry, can you restate the previous question? It has evaded my mind.
I was for my first, before I even asked the question, was just that right now you said that there's not a world where you could maintain
Thank you. Yes.
Viability with I think Stanley Bailey went a different direction with 375, but you have 353. You don't have 375. So you have 353.
Correct. We have 353 today as we are having this conversation.
Correct. Go ahead.
Not without unduly impacting the quality of the education we deliver. Remember, Eagle has approximately 25% SPED population, as well as other things that we deliver to the community. So it is in our determination that some of the cuts we might technically be able to make to improve the cash flow, we do not believe those are acceptable things to do relative to delivering on Eagle's mission, which is part of we have to do the finances with public dollars, as well as deliver on the educational promises we've made. And so you can't eliminate one to make the other work.
Okay. I with all due respect, I wish that would have been the mindset when you actually were operating the school. And I understand the SPED numbers; those numbers pretty much look like most of the schools that are serving in that exact same population. So I want to note that. I want to just say this last thing. Our job as a board, the law actually requires us to take certain action when we see behaviors dealing specifically with financial behaviors. And I want to make sure that you all are clear that regardless, not just you, but anybody watching, any school that needs to understand, we have an obligation. There is not a can we, should we, do we have the discretion? When a school is not economically viable, where there's a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or you are not accepting doing things in accordance with GAAP, we have the law requires us to take certain action regarding the school. Part of what I want people to understand is that when it comes to finances, the accountability, the autonomy you get to run those public dollars comes with a huge amount of accountability. And as a board, we have an obligation to take action, which starts with this in terms of holding you accountable, regardless of what may or may not come out of an asset acquisition. And people need to understand that. We take that very seriously as a board. That does not mean that an asset acquisition may or may not happen or whatever, but as a LEA, you need to understand we actually don't have a choice about what we do when we see these types of patterns and behaviors. And it is completely unacceptable that this board lost sight of what was important around safeguarding public funds. And that now, I want to make clear that now those 350 children and what is happening to them. Well, I saw in your letter, you said you hope they don't pay the price. I need everyone to understand when we don't safeguard public funds, children always pay the price. And that same population that you highlighted as, high needs, et cetera, no child should afford and can afford to pay the price. That population in particular, 100% cannot afford that. So I don't even know if I have a question as much as I want to make sure that that is stated. And so this is not to embarrass you. This is to say this is what accountability looks like. And this board will hold schools accountable when you don't do what's right with public dollars, period. We open, close, and evaluate schools. That's all we do as an authorizer. And I think I'm finished. Maybe.
If I might, I agree with accountability, and I agree with everything as you said it. Eagles board, to the best of our ability, with the information presented to us, attempted to follow those same principles, and it's those same principles that are leading us to request an asset acquisition, given the information we have for Boris today.
Thank you, Treasurer Wright. I think Vice Chair Salmon has a follow-up question.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I want to emphasize that I agree completely with the sentiments of my colleague and fellow board member, Chantel Wright, about the importance of a public airing of our fiscal oversight responsibilities. I think it's critically important that we have these discussions in public meetings and demonstrate to the District of Columbia, everyone, how seriously we take these matters. I mentioned the likely negative consequence of having those discussions in public on enrollment, because I think that's just a fact. And I am just trying to make the point that your ability to meet your enrollment projections is not what it might have been 6 months ago. I just think it's a reality that you should foresee that your ability to meet your enrollment projections now is diminished, and much less likely than it was before, which affects my assessment of what our options are here and what the consequences of those options are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Salmon. Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. It is troubling to me to hear that Eagle hasn't agreed to relinquish its charter unconditionally, particularly given what has been aired here tonight. In light of that, I am making a formal request for DC PCSB staff to consider whether there is basis to revoke Eagle Academy's charter and to bring that case before the board for a vote as soon as possible.
Thank you, Board Member Stanley Beatty. Board members, if there are no additional questions, I'll wrap
Yeah,
up.
before we close out though, can we just have Dr. Walker Davis at least say on staff the acknowledgement? I saw she came off the acknowledgement of the request of Board Member Stanley Beatty, which I fully support as well.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Stanley Beatty. That message is received and staff will act accordingly and do analysis and have that available for our board.
Thank you. Thank you. I also concur with all questions and comments raised by my board members. Thank you, Ms. Leonard. Thank you, Ms. Ogilvie. Thank you, Ms. Briscoe. Thank you, Mr. Lentner, for your service, for coming and joining and presenting to us this evening. To other LEAs and other LEA boards, what Treasurer Wright mentioned earlier about the significance of LEA board oversight cannot be understated. Public charter schools are ultimately about governance. It is a governance difference. These are public schools, student tuition-free, open enrollment. Here in the District of Columbia, we have the enabling conditions to chart a path out of the pandemic's impact, devastating impact for so many children. I'd like to be spending these meetings hearing about the innovative things our LEAs are doing to take advantage of that opportunity. It is disappointing we're coming to this point I appreciate all that has come before this, and I appreciate the incisive questions that our board are asking to ensure that we are fostering the best use of public dollars. Our students cannot afford to wait. We are looking forward to a great next school year, and these young people deserve to have every minute of instructional time to foster all of the learning that they need and that they deserve this next school year. So we now need to move as expeditiously as is feasible so that we can take the appropriate actions next. Thank you for the time this evening. Board members, I believe I next need to call up, let's see, excuse me. I'd like to invite Hannah Kuzno, Senior Manager of Sector Planning and Compliance, to introduce Friendship Public Charter Schools part of this proposal to acquire Eagle Academy's assets. Hannah, do we keep the Eagle team up here with us while we invite the Friendship team? We do not? Okay, thank you. And after you've given your introductory remarks, we'll invite the team from Friendship to join. It sounds like we've got a number of people here from Friendship, and we'll have everybody introduce themselves at that point.
Hello, my name is Hannah Kuzino, and I am a Senior Manager in the School Performance Department. Tonight, you will hear from Friendship Public Charter School regarding its request to amend its charter agreement. The school seeks to acquire the assets of Eagle Academy Public Charter School beginning in school year 2024-25 and assume operation of its 2 campuses and facilities. Eagle Academy Public Charter School students will be permitted to enroll at their school sites under Friendship Public Charter Schools management without going through the My School DC lottery. Finally, Friendship Public Charter School requests an enrollment ceiling increase of 508 students over 5 years. Between school year 2026-27 and school year 2030-31, the maximum enrollment total would increase from 5,115 students to 5,623 students. Representatives from the school are here to answer your questions.
Welcome, Friendship team.
Thank you. Would you like us to begin with introductions or remarks?
Let's do first introductions and then some remarks, especially because it's hard to see who everyone is.
Okay, absolutely. James, would you start, please?
Good evening. I'm James Waller. I'm the Chief of School Operations.
Monique Miller, Director of Performance Reporting and Evaluation.
Good evening. Bielka Scott Marcus, the Chief Academic Officer.
Good evening, Ken Sherry, Chief of Staff.
Good evening, John Glover, Chief of External Affairs.
Good evening, Catherine Sumfun, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Dylan Gruber, Chief People Officer.
We also have, I believe, virtually Darren Glimp, who is on Friendship's board, and our Finance Committee Chair. We have 2 parent board members that are on. I do not see them on the screen.
Right, we don't see them, but they are Anise Walker, Eric McKinley King, and Jeanette Mins.
And then finally, we have 2 financial advisors, Robert Ryan and Chris Wink, who are independent financial advisors for our bonds and our debts, who are also available if there are questions from the board. And then finally, I'm Pat Brantley, the CEO of Friendship.
Thank you and welcome everybody.
Thank you. With that, I will get started. First, we thank you for the opportunity to address you today and for your consideration of our request. I'd like to start by acknowledging the critical mission of the DC Public Charter School Board. Your role in keeping schools academically strong, financially sound, and compliant is vital. The decisions that you make shape the futures of countless students in our city, and I have a deep respect and regard for your efforts to do so. In a few days, students across the District of Columbia will wake up early, don their school uniforms, take their first day photos, and walk through the front doors of their school. With just days before Eagle's first day of school, I can't help but wonder, what message will the actions of today send? What happens with Eagle families who have done everything right, who have followed the process and enrolled their children in the spring, only to find out that their child's seat is not secure? As you consider the future of Eagle Academy campuses, I hope that you know that Friendship is committed to upholding the high standards this board expects, but we're ready to go even further. Over the past 25 years, Friendship has developed a disciplined approach that has allowed us to grow schools and student outcomes. We stand ready to bring that strength to Eagle Academy students who are counting on all of us now. Our proposal includes a request for Friendship to operate Eagle's Capitol Riverfront and Congress Heights campuses as Friendship locations, and also includes an enrollment ceiling increase of 508 seats, which is about 55% of Eagle's current cap. In the materials that we submitted, you'll note that our combined financials show how we meet all metrics for financial health, including debt service coverage, days cash on hand, and operating margins. Perhaps you are asking, though, why the acquisition? 3 reasons. First, Friendship can ensure a strong start to the school year and a path to excellence for the scholars. Second, at the primary level, which are the same grades served by Eagle, under PCSB's new Aspire framework, all Friendship campuses were estimated to be level 1 or 2, exceptional and strong, by PCSB staff during their simulations. And now when we look at current trends from more recent data, they're all estimated to be at level 1 performance under the new Aspire. Third, Friendship's operational, financial, and management strength allows us to operate at roughly half of Eagle's current ceiling, which I mentioned, while stabilizing finances and optimizing resources. With over 2 decades of financial stability and an investment-grade bond rating, we're more than equipped to better manage the finances. Finally, we've heard concerns about demand and enrollment challenges in the area, and note that as you apply your demand criteria, that in the area of Eagle's campuses, your staff memo mentions that Friendship's ratio of waitlist seats to offers more than meets the PCSB standard in Congress Heights. As a longtime member of the charter sector, I understand the significant and far-reaching consequences of this decision. Revoking Eagle Academy's charter seems necessary given its financial history. However, revocation or relinquishment must still be accompanied by a path forward for the children and families of Eagle. That is the plan that Friendship offers, a path forward for children and families. We have done it before. We have done it well. We can do it again. Thank you.
Welcome, Friendship team. Thank you, Ms. Brantley, for your presentation. Board members, would anyone like to begin with questions? Okay, I will kick things off first. Friendship team, can you share with us how Eagle Academy families will be impacted by your charter amendment request? Can you walk us through what that process would look like?
Sure, absolutely. So I would like you to know that over the past 3 or so weeks, we have had a daily presence and availability to families at Eagle, not only in sort of virtual meetings, but also being on campus, helping to conduct field days, and being there so that families could meet us and ask any questions that they have. And so what we see is that families would enter under Friendship management their existing Eagle campuses with a fully staffed team of teachers, dedicated aides, paraprofessionals, many of whom are current Eagle staff members, along with leadership and instructional supports that are Friendship. And so when you ask how families will be affected, we believe they'll come into the stable environments that they know, with the friends and the community members that they have come up with, along with greater financial stability from Friendship and stronger operations. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. It does. I have a couple follow-up. First, as whoever from the team has had the most interactions in these kinds of settings, are the families aware that this is a possibility but not a guarantee?
Yes. Yes, families are very aware that it is a possibility and not a guarantee. And that has come in our meet and greets that we have shared space with the Eagle team virtually and in person. It has also been a conversation and topic that has been raised during our time on campus in person with families specifically, and also families sharing with other families within the community based on messaging and interaction that we have had with them.
And if I could add to that, you heard the numbers before about 350, 354, 347. Since the time that we started engaging with families, it has stayed at an approximate stable 351. There are 4 families that have not fully completed the residency information. 2 of them still have questions, but the other 2 that did have questions answered and are preparing their information. So we haven't seen a degrading of families sort of pulling out since this conversation has started.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Dwight Davis, I think you may have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman, I'm sorry. So my question has to do with your programming, specifically as it relates to educate teachers. So one, the demographics of Eagle are different from, every school has different demographics. So specifically, as we look at students who will receive special services or special education services, like, are you prepared to provide a high level of care and education for those children, given the demographics? And then secondly, a little bit of research on friendship. You all have really taken a stand on the science of reading, and this is not the case across, many schools. How do you plan to ensure that the teachers at Eagle are, prepared? Like you're bringing, it's Eagle, but you're bringing a new culture. How do you plan to ensure that this culture of excellence is replicated, And then, I'm sorry to ask so many questions back to back to back, but then, there has, potentially been turnover, right, at the school. And how do you address morale? So you're walking into a situation where, culture and morale, there may be a need for teacher training, and then this demographics. Like, are you prepared? What is your plan for addressing these issues?
Thank you. Every school community is different. And you will often hear schools saying, like, we are family. You're working closely with young children, you're working closely with each other, you're working a lot of hours. And so we take seriously the fact that we have schools that we've grown organically. We have schools that have been part of an asset acquisition. There is always grief for what is lost. But there is also a lot to be gained, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I want to start with talking, though, about special needs. Every school is different in terms of demographics, but the demographics of the 2 Eagle sites in terms of race and at risk does look a lot like Friendship. Eagle, though, does have a high level of students with special needs, 25 to 26%, which may sound typical if you look across the average of DC. It's not necessarily typical for schools that are preschool to 3rd grade. However, we are operating schools that also have high levels of special needs of students that are younger. In fact, when we look at the profile of the students at Eagle, there is a high level of students with autism, with other kinds of delays, and we have very strong programs for students with autism. And so to get to one of the points about the high numbers, when you look at the staffing plan that Friendship has and Eagle staffing, of the 80 or so staff members, 24 of them are related to students with special needs. And we have already screened and have provisional offers for every single one of their staff, for those staff, and also for our own to go in and support. And so we know what the needs are. We have the services lined up from day one of opening the school, and we have the staff and related service providers available to meet those needs that are included in the IEPs. So that's sort of the number one answer to that. To the second about special programs and training, here's what I've found. even when schools have had resources, but for whatever reasons might be getting closed or revoked, there usually hasn't been what you would consider to be the year-over-year investment in staff and staff training. We're prepared from that. We have already opened our training to any Eagle members that want to join us. But the reality is that while Eagle has the same mathematics curriculum of friendship, they do not have the same reading or ELA curriculum, nor do they have the amount of time that we put in science of reading. And so we have assigned both a reading specialist and a really high level head of school, plus an academic director who will take responsibility for ensuring that over the course of the year, we are transitioning both to Friendship's curriculum and starting the training necessary, which is going to take 2 years of Eagle staff to make sure they can deliver under the science of reading. And I apologize for going long, but I think that Bianca, you might, if you also want more of an answer, Bianca can address it.
Yes, and I would just add to what Ms. Brantley had shared that the individual who Ms. Brantley named is actually a certified letters trainer that has been at the forefront of supporting Eagle team members over the last 3 weeks and has committed to ensuring that the training is carried over and that all teachers are trained and certified in the science of reading through the letters program.
And the last thing that I would mention is that that staff member is coming from Ideal. That before Friendship's takeover in 19 was a long-standing, one of the lowest performing schools in the District of Columbia, and typically on that lowest 5% list. And based on the last couple of years of performance, was graded by OSCE as one of the top 5 middle schools, and is one of the level 1 elementary schools when we look at the Aspire framework. And so she is coming from that campus that we were able to turn around, and will be at Eagle knowing what that work is.
Thank you. And just, I have to very quickly interject an operational item here. Because there are so many folks in one room, our transcriber is having a difficult time keeping track of who's saying what. If you could please state your name if you're going to share a comment going forward, and we'll make some corrections as needed going backward.
Yes, we will.
Please continue. No further questions from that one? Okay, thank you. I think, Dwight, if you did not have a follow-up to that, I'll send to Jim, and I'll get back to my follow-ups later.
Have you had any discussions with the Department of General Services about acquiring the Eagle lease?
Yes, we have reached out to the portfolio manager of the Department of General Services, who was responsible in prior acquisitions for getting it done. They typically do wait for an asset acquisition to be in the works, but that is something that we have started.
Any feedback from them?
James?
We have not had any initial feedback, but we're scheduling to talk after this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 sets of questions. First is around those, as I understand it, there's for an asset acquisition, and as it has been submitted, there are some assets that you would seek to acquire and some that you would not. Can you walk us through what you would and what you would not seek to acquire, and provide some rationale for that?
Sure, absolutely. So Eagle currently has 2 physical locations from which children are served. That is Capitol Riverfront, which has a private commercial lease. And then it is Eagle Congress Heights, which has both the DGS lease that was just mentioned, but also a fairly significant outstanding loan. They have a third property from which they operate, I assume what you would call your centralized office. And for the transcriber, this is Pat Brantley speaking. I apologize, I didn't say that. So we would seek to acquire the 2 facilities from which students are served. We don't see the economic viability or feasibility or need for the third location that they use to operate a centralized office from.
Okay, and that's it.
that the other assets would be those materials, equipment, furniture, curriculum that are in the buildings currently and used to serve students.
Okay. Okay, the second set of questions is around your experience with this. Friendship has had some experience acquiring other assets. Can you share with us some lessons learned from those and how you might approach them differently across all domains?
Sure, absolutely. The first has to do with the onboarding of staff, with the onboarding of families, and understanding just the need to make sure that there is sufficient hand-holding, exposure to friendship, integration into our schools. So we talked a little bit about the way that we would get that done. I would also say having on-site friendship leadership that knows our process and the way that we work and the expectations. I would say that if you look at Friendship's last acquisitions, I'm thinking about Ideal or Community Academy, we are much faster at, within 18 months, we want to show real strength in the academic program. So you'll see that. The second lesson learned is that, just say it in a particular way, the bottom is not often the bottom. Right? We will find when we go into schools, for example, that preventative maintenance hasn't been done. And so there's a lot of work that might need to be done to bring the school up to standard if you're talking about the physical asset of the school. There may be bills and things that are needed to operate the school that we didn't have firm knowledge of from the beginning. And so we now go in with the lessons learned with greater contingencies to do so. The expectations of current debtors and bondholders. And so, as Mr. Sandman mentioned, the conversation with DGS, but we've also had conversations with the developer that has the current lease on Capitol Riverfront and with the bank that is holding the note that's related to the construction there. So they're quite clear about the way we move forward, and we've integrated that into the financials that we've submitted to you. I think that it is
academically.
Yeah, please. Sorry, BL will speak next.
This is BL Scott Marcus, and I would just say that academically, the transition is very unique in its professional development and the alignment of ensuring that the proper instructional parameters are in place that mirror Friendship's goals. And some of that, again, has started with the introduction to a professional learning series that many Eagle team members did take the opportunity to attend last week. And so ensuring that families understand what changes may evolve in simple things like homework that students are bringing home, how they will spend their instructional day from the beginning to the end of the day, what happens during before care, what happens during after care, and all of the entities that align to our mission, but also our instructional program.
Thank you for that. And board members, please speak up if you have any follow-up questions so I don't hog the space.
Chair Cruzy, I do. Ms. Brantley, could you please clarify? I don't think I understood your answer to the question about, in terms of the assets and liabilities, what liabilities are you proposing to assume under the asset agreement or under the acquisition agreement?
Sure, the liabilities or the rent and lease that's related to Capitol Riverfront, which is the school that has 123 students and is at the Old Brother Point location. The lease and loan that is related to Eagle Congress Heights, that is there. There are a number of other liabilities that they have, or that they, meaning Eagle, have already handled. But those are the major liabilities that we are taking on.
The liabilities associated with the physical assets. And so then maybe my question, Chair Cruzy, is to staff, what happens to the other liabilities that they're not assuming? Or that they're assuming that the the acquisition agreement is approved? What happens to the liabilities that are not included?
Ms. Stanley Beatty, if I could just also say this, the things that are related to operating the school, which also include the staff, would obviously become friendship staff. I think you understand that, but I just wanted to mention that very specifically. And that's the bulk of what their expenses are, plus any ongoing costs going forward that might be utilities, water, etc. Eagle did have liabilities coming in to this fiscal year. We have seen a list of them, but they have taken care of most of those. So if there are any that are outside of the list that they have, that would be a point for us to sit down and talk about right now.
Okay, thank you. And so Dr. Walker Davis, again, for staff, for liabilities that are not included, what happens to those?
Yes, and I will ask, thank you, Board Member Stanley Beatty. I will ask our Chief Operating Officer to assist here. My understanding at this point is that Friendship is not proposing to take the central office building, so it would be the responsibility of the Eagles Board to have a plan for disposition of that particular property. And if there are any other liabilities that are not addressed in the list that Ms. Brantley just spoke to, they would have to have a plan for addressing those. I'm hearing right now that in the negotiations, they have already determined that many of those have been met, but I'd like to ask Will Henderson to add any context to what I just shared.
Sure, and I'm just focusing on what is not included and what hasn't been covered. I understand that there's potentially a plan for some stuff. What hasn't, and this is more of a procedural question, for those liabilities that are not included, what happens?
Yes, it is the responsibility of the entity that, the nonprofit, which is still Eagle, and they would have to dispose of those appropriately in this transaction. But I want Will to make any clarification to what I just said.
No major additional clarifications, Dr. Walker Davis, and Board Member Stanley Beatty. Essentially, any remaining cash that the entity Eagle Academy had at that time would be responsible. They would begin using that to tackle any liabilities that were not negotiated prior to this time, or that were new over the course of the disclosure timeline.
Well, they don't have to be new. It just has to be liabilities that they're not including for whatever reason. Let me ask you this. Yeah, so technically the process of the asset acquisition is that the charter is relinquished. So the entity no longer exists. So how do you create a plan via an entity that does, again, this is procedural for me. Mm-hmm. How does an entity that no longer exists, that has relinquished, how does it create a plan? And then is there cash to do so? Because is cash included in the agreement?
Right. I will ask Ms. Brantley to speak to the extent to which cash is included in the agreement or not.
Sure.
But I will say regarding once the charter is dissolved, the nonprofit entity still exists. They don't have a charter with the Public Charter School Board, and the nonprofit entity is still responsible for the obligations. The question that you're asking is, if there isn't cash, then what happens then? And I think that's a different scenario. I also would say our general counsel is not on this call, but could also provide some context around the legal obligations of that nonprofit entity. But the nonprofit entity does not dissolve just because we have relinquished the charter. They still exist and would be responsible for any closeout activities of that school.
And there is recourse to that nonprofit. And I know I'm asking specific questions that you probably don't have. I'm just curious if there's recourse to that nonprofit absent the charter from any creditors. It's an interesting conversation, right? Because the charter's gone, and all the assets are going with it. And so what recourse does a creditor have to an empty shell of a nonprofit? It's interesting.
I understand the question, member, and I do think our general counsel would be better positioned to give the specifics of how that has played out in the past. I just wanted to clarify that because we have relinquished the charter does not absolve the nonprofit entity for its responsibility under nonprofit law, as well as some other pieces, but I can get that level of clarification for you.
Yeah, to the extent that there's recourse to them. And then Ms. Brantley, I'm sorry. So can you speak to the assets that are in the agreement? Are you including liquidity in the agreement?
We did not include liquidity in the agreement. We included very specifically the leases, the property, the equipment, the books, the furniture, etc. What I can say that in my experience of having done this, the closing charter, which is still an existing nonprofit organization, is responsible for creating a wind down budget that gets them through several things. It says how they're going to dispose of any or discharge any liabilities that they have, but also gets them through a final audit that they are required by law to do. And so while yes, all of our bylaws now in the city for charters say that once you lose your charter, you have to close down, it is after that period of having dealt with your assets. That has happened lots of times, whether it's a revocation or a relinquishment, even if there's not an acquisition. In the case of, and Eagle can speak for themselves, and I'm sure that the PCSB's general counsel can as well. They did discharge some things like the line of credit using cash that they had, which is why there are less liabilities at this point than there were before we got to this point. So while I know it's a concern, I just know that that list is much shorter than it was.
Okay.
Friendship team, you have some experience, as we've already acknowledged, with asset acquisitions. What I don't recall is the time of year when those occurred. What time of year did they occur? Have they ever occurred during a school year? And if not, would you ever exercise, if approved, an approved asset acquisition during the course of the school year?
So, with the exception of the first asset acquisition, which we did, I guess now it's about 21 years ago, which did not get final approval until maybe the last week of June, first week of July by the PCSB. All prior asset acquisitions that I'm aware of were schools that knew somewhere between December and February that they were likely to either be revoked or had some reason to relinquish. There was a late, generally spring or earlier to late spring decision by the charter board. And by July 1, or the start of the fiscal year for charters, we were the operator of the school. A simple way, maybe not simple, but certainly a very clean way to operate. This is the first one that we've been involved in where the timeline is this short. So if your question is, if for whatever reason the decision on this was delayed until the middle of the year, could we still operate? I will just say that I would be concerned about about the families that are there and stability of what they might experience in the first part of the year, knowing that there might not be as much strength to operate outside of this kind of intervention. The second thing that I would say is that as we get further and further into the school year, I am concerned about the resources. And by that, I want to be very clear, the per pupil payment that would follow the students in order to serve them well. And would hope that the charter board would have, some, and I assume the charter board would have some kind of oversight in place to make sure that if we're starting to operate later in the year, let's say on the 60th day of school, that we would have 61 days plus the finances available to operate the school well. So that would be a concern. But it is not an impossibility.
Thank you for that. Board member Rodriguez, I think, has a follow-up.
Yes, thanks very much. And actually, this last one, I think, answered one of the questions that I was planning to ask. In your data that you presented on waitlist and performance is a little bit different from what the PCSB staff, I think, put in front of us. Part of that's because of Aspire and simulated Aspire versus the sort of the clear criteria, but the waitlist to seats numbers are actually quite different. Do you have a sense of where that difference comes from?
I do. Pat Brantley speaking again. So first, let me apologize for not having as much time to review the staff memo that was put out. But I did take note of the numbers that were presented. And the numbers presented for the ratios of seats offered to wait list, the staff looked at Friendship as an LEA. And obviously Friendship as an LEA operates from far Northeast, Northwest DC to Southeast DC. They did identify our by campus, including the campuses that are in the vicinity of where Eagle currently operates. And so on a by campus level or Friendship as a whole LEA, I agree with their numbers, right? Which are that, you know, elementary is lower than middle and high school. However, we are talking about students that are in a particular area of the city. And the staff's own memo notes that if you look at Friendship students, we're either anywhere from, I apologize, 3 to 17 times the PCSB standard in that area. I do recognize that you have an enrollment ceiling policy, and that policy is applied as an LEA. But we are talking about students who are sitting in one part of the city. And the demand for Friendship in that part of the city meets your enrollment ceiling criteria. I know you may or may not be able to consider it, but that's where I think the difference in the numbers exists.
Okay, thank you. And PCSB team, I would love to see just if based on Friendship slides, any doesn't have to be right now, but between now and Monday, any comment you all have on the numbers that they presented, both the Aspire simulations and the waitlist to seats enrollment things. Those are obviously the criteria under which we would think of you all as the kind of right high performing LEA to assume this, separate from the other issues around timing, et cetera. So I think those are important things for us to look at and think and consider.
Noted.
Yes, thank you very much. It sounds like from Chair Cruzy's question, you know, if this decision were delayed, you know, you'd be open to it, but it's not ideal. And I guess I just wanted to say, I think that hearing where everyone is would just urge you to sort of think about that case and consider it, because I think that for, you know, I think if I look at where everybody is, there's a sense that we might not be able to make this decision by Monday. You know, and I think that that's just something, you know, for you all to think about as we think about what happens in the future, if there are revocation, you know, sort of considerations or other things like that. But understanding that it's not your ideal.
First of all, Pat Brantley again, and thank you for mentioning it. I want to just reiterate something I said at the beginning. The work that your board has to do, it's heavy, and we do understand that. And there are also legal timelines that I know you have to consider as you think about what to do with Eagle and what to do with Friendship. Our commitment, because we work in the community, because that is where we started, because these are children that Friendship was founded to serve, is that we want to make sure that those children have a path. And if the timeline is not ideal, we still believe that we can make sure the children have a path. My hope is that we can work with the board staff over the next 2 days just to frame what it means, because you would talk about this happening later in the year, which means that between now and whenever that decision would be made, the campuses would be operated by current management that might be constrained for many reasons to provide the management, financial oversight, and et cetera necessary to ensure that there is still a there whenever this later decision is made. And so I do, you know, more than open to working with staff to lay out what we think the concerns are and what is necessary.
Understood. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Nick. Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Ms. Brantley, I just want to go back to your comment about the enrollment ceiling and make sure that I understood it as a follow-up to Board Member Rodriguez. So were you saying that the enrollment ceiling increase is not a direct accommodation to Eagle's current population? You're saying that that enrollment ceiling is influenced by something else? Could you say that? Could you explain that part again?
Sure. In terms of the enrollment ceiling that we are asking for, we're asking for enough seats for it to be financially viable, but not as many as Eagle has today. And so that would be a net decrease in the number of seats in the charter sector based on what we're asking. That is one part of it. The other part that I was addressing is there is a standard for enrollment ceiling increases that if I understood Mr. Rodriguez's question, it was that the numbers that we put up about demand don't match exactly what was in the staff memo. And that is because we looked at demand according to the area where these schools are going to operate and Friendship campuses in those areas. And so that was in the staff memo, that if you look at those Friendship campuses, that ratio was there. But if you look at Friendship as an LEA, and Friendship operates all across the district, and all across the district, we were seeing charter sector demand. It's different depending on where you are in DC. And so the only thing that I was clarifying was that if you look at where Eagle campuses are and Friendship demand, then we're meeting it. If you're looking at LEA citywide, then you are seeing the same issues that we see across the city, which is, birth rates affecting elementary, better middle and high school. The staff does note that in their memo, that when you look at the seats, in particular in Ward 8 for Friendship Southeast Middle, that the ratio for Friendship is much higher than the 1.0 standard. And I'm reading this here. It is at 17.6. And that this particular expansion could address the fact that we would be delivering more students to those upper grades at Friendship, addressing this fairly high demand. And the staff notes that in their memo.
In this proposed location.
Yeah, that is correct.
And so where are those students coming from if the surrounding LEAs are under enrolled?
So those students, well, first of all, there are students that are already at Eagle. So that is indeed the case. I can't speak to the under enrollment of some of the surrounding schools. Some of the surrounding schools were more newly added. And so if you have opened or expanded grades since the time of the pandemic till now, I think you're seeing that as being more of the pressure across schools. But I can speak to Friendship's experience in that area, particularly, which is that because we are keeping more students across the lifetime of their being in their public school education, that the number of seats that we have versus the number of offers shows the demand that was in the enrollment ceiling increase. But while I can't speak to the other schools that are there, I can speak to ours.
Okay. Thank you.
Colleagues, if we have no further questions, I will thank the Friendship staff for joining us this evening.
Can I say one last thing, Chair Cruzy? I just want to say thank you to the Friendship team for considering this. I realize it may or may not. Yeah, there are various reasons we don't know how it's going to go on Monday, but as Dr. Walker Davis has reminded us repeatedly, the default was just to keep going with the FCAP with Eagle and possibly to whatever the consequences of that were going to be. And it is only because you expressed this willingness to consider this that we're looking at this. Again, who knows where we'll get to on the merits, but we know that your willingness to consider it is an important thing. So I just wanted to say that out loud. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Friendship team, for joining us this evening and for answering our many questions. Everybody know that we will be reconvening again on Monday night. We have quite a bit of work before us till then. Colleagues, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the August 14th, 2024 special board meeting.
I'm going to lead a roll call vote. Secretary Adamathanian, I think, can communicate by proxy. Okay. Vice Chair Salmon?
Aye.
Treasurer Chantel Wright?
Aye.
Nick Rodriguez?
Aye.
This is Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Also an aye. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.